Γεια σας, το Guitarspot σήμερα βρίσκεται στο 2 Γιώργο Φακανά και σήμερα έχουμε την τιμή να έχουμε κοντά μας τον μπασίστα Bryan. Mr. Bella, thank you for the time, for the interview. Welcome to Greece. It's the second time you've been here with Aristocrats.
Second time, yeah.
Okay, so second album as well. Last year we had the opportunity to talk with Mr. Guthrie Govan and explain us a bit about the process of writing the material and exchanging audio files and stuff like that through mail. How was it this time?
It was the same process, but it was informed by a lot more familiarity between the band members because we'd been touring the first album for a year or more. So we really learned a lot about each other, and then that helped us in the writing process. Even though we write in isolation, like Guthrie said, we write our own demos completely. So like I can program drums and play terrible guitar enough to be able to make a demo complete. And then I send it to the other guys. Now, we did that the first time, but it was kind of like a blind date in a way. And this one was a lot more, I think, cohesive and informed by the fact that we knew each other much better.
Someone would expect that because of the touring and getting to know each other, you would have more songs that you write together in jamming sessions and stuff like that. But you still write each other your material on your own and then exchange the material.
Yeah, my feeling, and I think that everybody shares this feeling, is that while we write individually, when we play the song together, it becomes an Aristocrats song because of the people who are playing it, because of the sounds that the people make when they play together. But we wrote, we all had solo albums out before we met each other, so we were familiar with the process of writing our own material. And the truth is that when we're not together, we're not together. We're just scattered off doing other work, or we're traveling somewhere else or something. So, the idea that we have, we sit down in a room somewhere, together and just kind of hash ideas out. We never have time for that because we never know when we're going to write.
Apart from the Aristocrats, what else was on your plate this year?
Well, Joe Satriani is a big deal. He's a pretty busy touring guy, so I've been playing with Joe, and, I'm the business manager of the Aristocrats as well. So it's my job to kind of like make sure that our schedule works with the Joe Satriani schedule because Marco Miniman is in Joe Satriani's band also. And then you have Guthrie who's in Stephen Wilson's band. So it's like this
Marco is as well.
Which Marco, exactly, he was, and then he was out, and then, we don't know. So, it's like this constant email game between me and Stephen Wilson's manager and Joe Satriani's manager trying to fit all the pieces together. And I think we've been doing a pretty good job of it so far. This year, between Joe Satriani and the Aristocrats, Marco and I are going to be on the road for over 10 months.
Whoa.
So we've decided that we're not going to do that next year because it's too much. It's too long to go out. But we're grateful to have the work, and it's we in the past I think Marco and I and Guthrie too have had a lot more different projects going on. But now that the Aristocrats is kind of like a nice steady machine, we've been doing that and maybe one or two other things.
Okay, so from what you're saying, I'm gathering that you're gonna continue on with the Aristocrats as long as it.
Yeah, that's the idea. We'll take a little break maybe between the second album tour and starting the third album, but that's the plan.
No immediate plans for another album.
We have some plans, but I don't want to say in an interview because I don't know if they're going to be solid or not. So we're still working that out.
Okay, so you're working with Josh Adriani as well, but he's a very big.
He's a legend.
Yes, he's a legend. It's safe to say that you have been working with great guitarists for how many years?
I've been lucky to work with really good guitarists ever since the beginning of my career. That's how it started, was that when I came right out of Berklee College of Music, my first gig was with Dweezil Zappa. This is back in 1993. I was very young. And then from there to Mike Keneally, who I've been, Mike Keneally's guy who used to play guitar with Frank Zappa after Steve Vai left the band. And I've been working with him for 20 years now. And then eventually Steve Vai also, and then, and then there's a guy, I don't know if you know this metal cartoon called Death Clock. Are you familiar with Death Clock here in Greece?
Yes.
You are?
Yeah.
You know what it is?
Yeah.
Okay, well, Brendan...
It's irrelevant if I know it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if everybody else knows. It's based on an American television show, and it's a metal band. Anyway, there's this guitarist named Brendan Small. He's a great guitarist, too. And then somehow that spilled into Joe Satriani, and then, eventually Guthrie. I don't, you know, the funny thing is, I never really set out to be you would think that a guy who plays with all the hotshot guitarists and like kind of like exists in this world would be kind of like almost like a Billy Sheehan character, you know, the really and I don't do that, and I never meant to be that guy when I was practicing when I was in music school. So the idea that
How did you start playing the bass?
I started playing in junior high school when I was a kid, like 13
In
years
lack
old.
of a guitarist for a band, or
No,
did you
no,
like
no.
the bass from the start?
I'll tell you what it was. I was playing piano and to classical piano. And my parents said, "Well, you have to start in the orchestra now." And I looked at the instruments in the orchestra, and I'm like, "I don't want to play any of these instruments. What? French horn, violin, ugh." So I didn't really even want to be in the orchestra. I just wanted to play rock music. But I was 10 years old. I didn't know how to say no to my parents yet. So I decided to be really obnoxious and play the biggest instrument that I could find, because they definitely won't like bringing me to orchestra back and forth with this gigantic instrument in the car. And the biggest one was the bass. So I started with that. And then 3 years later, I switched from acoustic to electric.
That's simple.
That's how it happened.
And then you went to Berkeley to study?
Then I went to Berkeley. And then I realized when I got to Berkeley that I was a terrible bass player. And I needed to practice a lot. So I practiced a lot.
Do you think that everyone playing music, bassists or guitarists, need to have some kind of formal education in their instruments? Or?
No, they don't. I mean, the best example is the two guys that I'm in the band with. Guthrie and Marco didn't have formal music college education like I did, and they're great. I think that for a lot of people, I think that Marco and Guthrie are geniuses, you know? I mean, I just think they're just so amazing on their instrument. There are very few people in the world like them. I think that for most people, music school is a way of being taught the language of music if you can't just pick it up on your own. And for most people, they need, I think, it's helpful to have that bridge, as opposed to just sitting in your room. Now, of course, there's YouTube now, and you have access to things online, being able to see things and understand things that we didn't have when we were younger.
Do you think that helps the learning process, or spoils it?
It does both. It does both.
Mostly?
I think mostly it helps. You know, being able to see things, I think you can assimilate information faster and decide what you like and what you don't like faster, which is, I think, ultimately a good thing. But as far as the trained versus non-trained, I think training is good just because I think that it's good to be in an environment, not because they're going to teach you this curriculum, but because you're around a bunch of other music students and musicians, and you see what they're doing, and you're around 2,000 other people who play. So that totally breaks you out of your box.
And gives you some perspective.
Gives you some perspective that you wouldn't otherwise have. I mean,
and networking, perhaps.
Oh, it's big time. I got the whole reason I'm in this whole Zappa instrumental guitar world is because my best friend there was a drummer whose mission in life was to be Frank Zappa's drummer. And I just started playing with him. And then he got the gig with Dweezil Zappa. And then there was a bass opening, and then he called me, and then suddenly I was playing with Dweezil Zappa. I like Frank Zappa, but I'm not the biggest Zappa fan in the world, but I was like, oh, a gig? Okay, I'll do that. And that was because of him.
Yeah.
So I just want to reiterate that, you know, you don't have to be like kind of the chopsiest guy in the world in order to, you know, especially if you're a bass player, you know, to fulfill the right function in the band. And the function of the band is, if you're a bass player, I think, is to be the bridge between the rhythm and the harmony elements of the band. You know, the keyboardist and the singer and the guitarist are handling all the harmonic and melodic stuff. The drummer's handling all the rhythmic stuff. Only the bass player sits in between. That's the bass player's job.
Is it better for you to work with trios or with bands with two guitarists or synth players? What do you feel about when you're playing with the?
Well, it all depends on the song. I mean, like, you know, songs are written for a trio or a quartet.
Yeah, but when do you feel more comfortable? More like
it depends on the band. It's not like I prefer trios because they're trios. I prefer this trio because I like playing with Marco and Guthrie, and because the music that we've written is fun to play with this group. It's not because it's a trio. And like when I'm playing with Mike Keneally in my band, my own solo act, those are 5-piece bands. And I like playing with 5-piece bands then because the music needs 5 pieces in order to work. And when I hear all those other things,
you usually write music, apart from the aristocrats, usually you write music for weekend compositions or...
You know, well, before the aristocrats started, I was writing for larger band, mostly. I needed a 4 or 5 piece band, sometimes 6 pieces to pull off the material that I write on my own. But, I mean, for the aristocrats, I write trio music because it's a trio.
Okay. if you have to think about dreams you had when you started, collaborations perhaps, or playing in several venues and stuff like that, do you think that you have fulfilled some of your dreams, or do you have any more new dreams as you go along?
Every dream I've ever had in terms of fulfillment musically has already been fulfilled. That doesn't mean that I don't want to do other things, but I mean, like, to sit here and be like, yeah, what I've done is nice, but I really want to do no. You know what I mean? I don't think that it's a cop-out to say, oh my God, I've been so blessed, I'm so grateful, I've played in, you know, with all these great musicians, and I've had all these amazing experiences on stages. If it all had to stop tomorrow, it would all be great. And I just wish that I could just take my head and just kind of like beam it into, you know, something, because it's hard when you're a musician to kind of, it's hard to have a career. It's just hard even to make a living, you know. So I feel really, really fortunate.
Do you think that it's harder nowadays or in the earlier years?
I think it's actually
started.
I think it's easier now because of the internet. I think it's easier to network, and it's easier if you have the motivation to self-start.
Yeah, but some would argue that there's a lot of material out there, and it's difficult for people to focus.
Well, that's the theory of the long tail, and you know, of how, like, you know, there's music here that everybody's paying attention to, and then there's more other music and other music and other music, and there's this much people paying attention to, and then there's all this music that no one's paying attention to. I think the benefits outweigh the negatives. Mm-hmm. The idea that you can make a decent sounding record now, and you don't have to go to a record company and get the money to go into the expensive studio, that's priceless. You know, as far as what happens to your music after you make it, that's not up to you. That's up to everybody else.
It's more democratic, more free, more radical.
I think it's more meritocratic. You know the word?
Yeah.
Meritocratic. It's like the market decides. There's no gatekeeper anymore. The gatekeeper used to be the record company guy and the studio guy who charged $1 million for you to make your demo. You know, now, if you got something that, you know, if you can get people to pay attention to what you're doing, and you got something that's good, people can find you. That's what I think.
Okay. So let's talk about gear.
Okay.
For instance, how do you choose the stomp boxes that produce the sound in this particular gig and in general?
I'll tell you, I think that sound is a really, really important thing. I think it's just as important as practicing the instrument and the notes that you play. Because you think about it, what is the thing when you turn on your favorite artist, you know, what's the first thing you know is that you recognize the sound of that guy. You know, when you hear John Scofield, you only have to hear 3 notes and you know that's John Scofield.
That has to do with the
sound
and or the playing.
Well, both. I mean, you know, that's what I mean, is that like the way that he attacks the strings, the kind of guitar he chooses to play, the kind of pedals and effects he chooses to use, the kind of amplifier he chooses to use, all turns into this one thing that ends up on a record, and then you hear it and you go, that's John Scofield.
Yeah, but
and that requires...
Usually if you give crappy equipment to a well-known player with a distinctive personality in his playing, he will still sound like him.
Yeah, but not in the beginning he won't.
In the beginning
at
of his
16,
career,
yeah. 16, 18, 20 years old, no. 25 years old, 30 years old, maybe. 40, 50, 60, okay. There are very few people who defy that. And for most of us, the overwhelming majority of us, you know, it's a journey. You know, you have this sound that you hear in your head, and then you play, and then you hear something else. And then the whole journey of your life is trying to get between what the sound that you're making and the sound that you hear in your head. So for me, that sound, the bass, the default sound is like a really bright jazz bass sound that's aggressive, not sweet, not fusiony, but aggressive, so that when you really play hard in a certain way, you can make it sound like a rock instrument. But when you play soft, you can make it sound like a little bit kind of like a pop R&B kind of bass sound. So I use that as my basis, and that's my red Mike Lowell bass. And I've had that for 13, 14 years. I think it's a great all-purpose, bright-sounding jazz bass. It's ash body, maple neck, which contributes to, ash maple. It contributes to brightness. Maple always is going to be brighter. I have another bass, another Mike Lowell bass, which is alder body and rosewood fingerboard, and that's totally set up to be the opposite sound, to be dark. Yes, exactly. And you can hear them. It's obvious what I'm using them for when you hear me play with the Aristocrats or anybody else. As far as the pedals are concerned, when I audition a pedal, I am really, really picky. you know, companies will be like, I want to give you a pedal, can you try it out? And I'll be like, well, in 2 months I can try it out because I need to be on a loud sound stage. I need to be under gig conditions. I can listen to it for a second in headphones, and I can hear kind of what it does. Okay, but I need to know what's going to happen when the snare drum's going, bah! The cymbals going, and the guitar's going, ah! It totally changes the way that pedal reacts. So when I take a pedal I think has a chance at maybe ending up on my pedal board, I'll bring it to a rehearsal studio, I'll go in a sound stage, I'll set up my full rig, I'll set up my other pedals with it, and then I'll get tracks, and I'll put them in the monitor, and I'll fucking blast them at me like I'm playing a loud gig, and then I'll use the pedal. And the things that you learn when you do that are priceless. And that, to me, is a practice regimen that enough people don't do. I mean, everybody practices the instrument, but most people don't practice actually listening to what the rig sounds like under gig conditions before they start throwing things around. So that's how I choose what pedals end up on my board. And every pedal that I have on there has the ability to cut through and make the proper sound with all the other instruments really raging.
Okay. If you have to say which ones are your favorite and the ones that you cannot play without.
Well,
is there any, if any?
There are a couple that are really, really mainstays for me. One of them is the Exotic Effects Bass BB preamp. I use a clean sound as my default sound, you know, like a clean kind of funk R&B sound. That's what the Gallion-Kruger thing. Mm-hmm. I don't use an Ampeg because I don't want overdrive in my natural sound. That thing is the best Ampeg in a box I have found so far. Mm-hmm. It's very dynamically sensitive and it reacts really well and it sounds great. So that is a must.
You usually low gain, mid gain, high gain?
Oh no, the gain is cranked, but it's not super saturated. It's just because the way the pedal works, when you crank gain up all the way, it just gives you moderate drive. The Boss OC2, the old brown box octave pedal.
Yes.
I've never heard of an octave pedal that sounds better than that, and I would shoot the person who tried to take mine away from me. Then after that, you know, I mean, I always have a volume pedal on there and a tuner for silent tuning. It gets a little bit more esoteric after that. I mean, I have a Demeter optocompulator that I use as a compressor at the end of the pedal board to kind of squeeze everything and recover a little bit of the gain loss that you have from going through.
You use it in the end of the chain?
End of the chain, not the beginning.
How come?
Because I like it to squeeze the effects as opposed to squeezing the sound and then going through the effects. I like it to compress the affected sound and have that be the last thing before.
And you couldn't get that from a mixing console or stuff like that in real life. You have to control that from.
Because I want to hear it in my rig also. You know what I mean? If it's in the console, it's not going to hit my rig.
You usually listen in the live situation from your rig or from the monitors?
Both.
Okay.
I have the rig, and then there's a certain kind of setup. I'm particular about monitors too. I'm really picky about it. Ask Guthrie and Marco. I'm way more picky than I am. I'm way more picky than they are.
How come?
Because I want to hear the whole band crystal clear. It's not as crucial for Marco has his own set of monitor parameters because he doesn't want to have too much drums in his monitors because it messes up the house sound and can create feedback. So he'll take, he'll hear the guitar and bass ambiently and play the gig, and he can hear what's going on without having to have it right there. Guthrie also likes to have it occur naturally. I want to have every detail right there. So I put everything in the monitors. All the drums, guitar, and bass guitar. And I try and I want to make it sound like a record. That's what I want in front of me.
Well, that must be challenging when you're playing all over the world and you don't have your own sound man.
That's true. That's true. But you know what? I've learned I can get pretty close under some pretty tough circumstances now because we've done a lot of work.
Okay. What else on your pedal board?
Well, I'm using my chorus pedal is a Retrosonic stereo chorus, which is a very boutique company, small company out of Canada. You can't get them anymore. And I even bought another one because I was afraid what happens to this one, and it sounded totally different. So I'm just praying that the thing never breaks. I also have a stupid, a Digitech digital delay, the old one. I have the TC Electronics Hall of Fame reverb. Great pedal reverb, really good. I have another thing that's really interesting is just for one song on this gig and maybe 4 songs in the Joe Satriani gig is a dark glass vintage microtubes. It's almost like a really, really souped up Rat pedal, but it's really, the quality of the overdrive is really nasty. You can really make it sound like, because I don't use a pick. I use my fingers for everything, but sometimes I want it to sound like ching, 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 you know, like that. And that thing, there's a song called Living the Dream on the new album, which has a really aggressive overdriven bass sound. I use that, but it doesn't have any active EQ on it, and it kind of messes up the low and the high end a little bit. So I run a Aphex bass exciter along with it, because that's a 2-band EQ and compressor. So I run those 2 pedals together. So whenever I need to use them, I go like this.
Both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a wah, a bass wah. I use that with the Exotic Effects BB bass preamp and a Digitech bass driver together. The Exotic BB bass preamp is for overdrive, but the bass driver is for distortion. When I say distortion, I mean really saturated, smooth, creamy distortion. So I use those 2 together, and I drive the wah with that. And this is really important for anybody who wants to use wah with bass, because if you don't drive the wah ends up sounding like this. It's like wee, wee, wee. It just doesn't do anything. If you add overdrive, then it goes wow. And if you add a lot of overdrive, it goes meow, like that. So I mean, having the drive before the wah pedal makes all the difference. And I think that's it.
Okay. So, I would like to thank you for the time. Wish you well on your things that you want to do from here on with the Aristocrats, on your solo projects, and the Joe Satriani gig and whatever comes from that. And I wish we can see you more in Greece with Aristocrats or other bands here.
I'll get back as soon as I can.
Thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you.
Για περισσότερες συνεντεύξεις, παρουσιάσεις εξοπλισμού και online μαθήματα κιθάρας, επισκεφτείτε το Guitarspot.Gr.